To start us off, we have Nancy from OAB announcing the scholarship winners when did their interviews yesterday morning, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. This is one of the fun parts of my job. I'm with OAB and I'm announcing the scholarships. These are actually OETA scholarships, but they are very busy on Fridays preparing for their evening newscast. So I get to do this part. So on behalf of OETA, I have a statement that I want to read that they provided for me. This year's scholarship applicants were all outstanding students. Their vision for the futures all took different paths. However, they each had a clear path for their futures. We originally planned to present 4 scholarships, but 5 applicants impressed us very highly with their passion about the industry, their desire to use the medium to make the world a better place. So we've decided to award 5 scholarships instead of 4. And the recipients are, and these are in no particular order, Katani Gooch, University of Oklahoma. Congratulations, Katani. Alexandra Dusky with Oklahoma State University. Tyler Whitehead, University of Central Oklahoma. From Langston University, Jaden Hanna. And from East Central University, Cliff Tomlinson. So congratulations
Fantastic.
To those students. Thank you for applying for the scholarships, and we are looking forward to having you as colleagues in the very near future. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. So for today's panel, we have Roger Harris from Score Broadcasting and Vance Harrison from OAB, Oklahoma Association of Broadcasters, and our own Daniel Thompson, the president of Oklahoma Broadcast Education Association. And I'll be moderating. I'm Mike Maxwell. And to get us started, I have one question, and this is geared maybe a little bit more towards Roger and Vance. What changes or adaptations have you seen or have been made in broadcasting since spring 2020? What things have affected you and how have you had to change your practice? Or how have broadcasters you know changed their practice?
I'll let Roger go first.
First of all, shout out to Cliff Tomlinson. We kind of hired him a couple of months ago to do some videography work for us, and the guy's doing a fantastic job. So shout out to Cliff. I know you're on here, and just absolutely great job for us. You know, in terms of obviously COVID has impacted broadcasting more than anything that I can ever remember. I've been here 43 years, and COVID has changed in the business and in so many ways, from the standpoint of obviously how we conduct meetings to how we interact in our own station. We don't even have live guests in here anymore. People picking up prizes, everything has changed in terms of COVID, and that's been a real negative. And then on top of that, you have the business of advertising, which we're in, and it has changed the way that we communicate with clients. It has changed the client base in the sense that we've lost customers. We have customers who can't get inventory. That's impacted their budgets. And this has pretty much been an industry-wide thing. So that's been the biggest thing in terms of that's impacted us. Obviously, we've had to change to gotten into some things that we haven't had to deal with before. And what I just did the shout out to Cliff about is a prime example. Streaming, we've had to get into streaming high school and college sporting events, which is something that I tried my best to stay away from because it puts us in the world of television. I'm having to deal with things like cameras now and tripods and editing, things that I've avoided all these years because radio is much simpler. And we literally was sort of forced to get into this in order to maintain the security of our broadcast rights for the schools, because they all pretty much demanded that their games be streamed. That's just one example of how the nature of the business has changed. I know Vance can speak to this a lot because he's helping a lot of other broadcasters do this. But it was a whole new ballgame for us getting into video streaming. Once again, changed the way we've had to think in terms of radio. And I could go on to other things like social media and how that's changed everything as well. But huge changes in the last year and a half here in the world of traditional media.
Yeah, and let me add, so the Oklahoma Association of Broadcasters represents all of the TV and all of the radio stations in the state of Oklahoma. Roger's one of our most seasoned and most adept broadcaster, 43 years at the same radio station. Started out as a DJ, moved up through the ranks to a salesman, sales manager, and has been the general manager was a part owner, and then sold to the Chickasaw Nation, Roger, about 20 years ago or so?
Exactly 25 years ago last month.
So Roger's seen the entire gamut of on-air, sales management, general management, owner, and now a part of a large company, the Chickasaw Nation. He's also very, very, very adept at the engineering aspects of it. So he's probably our most versatile broadcaster because he has to do it all. And that sort of segues to where the business is now. This pandemic was just a horrible experience for the entire world. So that said, if it had happened 20 years ago in 2001, our world would have been completely turned upside down. We wouldn't have had social media to work through. We wouldn't have had Zoom to work through. We wouldn't have had the technology of the apps on the cell phones to work through. We would have had email, but it really would have only just been one-to-one email. So what's happened with the technology, as bad as this pandemic was, we were lucky in one respect, and that is that technology was our friend. And Rogers just alluded to it. His radio station wouldn't have been able to video stream the OETA high school football games 20 years ago. Now he can, and interestingly enough, he's pretty darn good at it. And all of his radio listeners now want to hear the radio audio and the video. So, a lot of good has from the broadcasting business has come out of it. I'm gonna sort of take a little bit of what Roger said and add to that. The pandemic, especially April, May, June, July, and August of last year, crushed the advertising base of our business. And that's all we are, is advertising based. So it really was, it was as hard on us, maybe not quite as hard, but it was awfully hard on us, sort of like it was on restaurants when people just stopped going to the restaurant. Roger, would you guess that on average for April, May, June, and July, the advertising revenue for broadcasters was off 50%?
50% to 60% in those first few months. And to be honest, it's 2 years later, we still haven't recovered.
Okay. So, we are a business, and in general, we've been a very profitable business for the last 100 years. But this thing smacked us, where, on the advertising front. Now, I will tell you that television rebounded quicker than radio. And quite frankly, television found new advertisers quicker than radio. And then a third thing that happened to television while this all happened is that there was a shift, and it's been going on for a while, but it was sped up with the pandemic, of news content becoming more popular in the morning than in the afternoon or the evening. So if you went back to 20 years ago, the 10 o'clock news was the king on a TV station, and now it's behind the morning news on a TV station. So you've seen a shift in the content. As far as the actual product itself, the content, either on a radio station or a TV station, they've become very, very adept at the technology. Roger said that he doesn't have live guests anymore at his radio station, but he still has guests. So he's gotten pretty good at being able to accommodate the guests through technology, whether it's Zoom or GoToMeetings or whatever the platform is. He's pretty good at it. He's taking an awful lot of audio that is not coming from the studio next to him. He's doing it himself. The television stations are using this technology. And I will tell you that as we go forward, and let's hope that we do get to the other side of this pandemic at some point, I think this technology is going to be here to stay. And I'll give you a perfect example of it. A television station in Oklahoma City, whether it's 4, 5, Channel 9, Channel 25, they employ somewhere between 100 and 120 employees historically. And of the 100 to 120 employees, before the pandemic, 100 of them or 99 of them went to the TV station whenever they went to work. And today, of the 100, only about 15 to 18 are in the TV station at any one time. And my guess is that when we come out of the pandemic, we're going to be looking at 50 people being in the TV station, 50 people not being in the TV station. So as you as students think about what the pandemic meant for your employment opportunities, you have not been hurt by the head count at the broadcast stations, but it's going to be a lot different than it was before March of 2020. So I hope that gives sort of a framework to your question.
Yeah, and it's a good lead into our next one. What challenges are university graduates facing as they enter media at this time, whether they graduated in spring 20 or over the last year? What things are different, difficult, etc.? We could start.
Why don't I go first on that, and then I'll throw that one over to Roger, and then to somebody on the curriculum side of things, if that's okay.
That sounds great. Go ahead.
Yeah. So some things never change. A good burger is always a good burger. They cook them a little different here and there, and then people try a lot of things. But there are some time-honored things. Here's what's time-honored. If you're a communicator, if you're a good writer, if you're concise, and if you're well-liked, you're going to be successful, whether this is 1940, 1960, 1980, 2000, or 2021. Roger is looking for communicators. Roger is looking for people that want to listen to somebody that they like. Roger is looking for somebody that can write well, that is concise, not to mention shows up on time. So those variables have not changed. But what has changed is you're asked to do more. There used to be that if you were a DJ at a radio station, that's what you did. You were a DJ at the radio station. You weren't a social media contributor or aggregator. You weren't a platform distributing person. These video streams that Roger puts his football games on, not only is he, in the old days, he just put it on his terrestrial radio signal. So it went out on his FM dial and or his AM dial, depending on the frequency. And that was it. It was one shot. It was done. It was over. Now when he puts it out on his video stream, he's putting it out on his website. He's cross-posting it with YouTube and with Facebook, and not only Facebook in general, but the OETA High School Facebook page, plus whatever the visiting or home team is Facebook page. So his platform distribution has become significantly greater. And that means that the people that work for him have to be better at the distribution system. So you're not just a DJ anymore. You're not just an on-air anchor or an on-air or a reporter at a TV station. You're doing the photography. You're doing the editing. You're shooting it on the run. You are doing almost 2 to 3 jobs versus what happened 20 or 30 years ago. Now, you could look at that as a little extra work. And to me, that would be the glass is half empty. Or you could look at it as I'm more involved and it's more exciting and more intriguing, and then the glass is half full. You all pick, but what I do know is Roger wants to hire the people who the glass is half full, who are intrigued by doing more things, who are interested in cross-posting, who want to edit the piece so that it gets edited the way they want it edited. You know, I was interviewed a couple of weeks ago by a gentleman from Channel 4 here in Oklahoma City, the NBC affiliate. Unbeknownst to anybody watching Channel 4 when the piece aired, he was driving in his car on his cell phone as he did the interview. And he was able to edit the interview with the questions of me. So I was like this, I was on a Zoom, I combed my hair, I looked pretty good. And he did the entire thing from his car on a cell phone in traffic. Now that meant that the story was as red hot as it could be. He interviewed me at 4:50 in the afternoon and it was on the 5 o'clock news. So that's the exciting thing to me about this technology is you're going to be able to go way, way, way further and do things that you never expected. So I would only ask all of you that are in the student business right now and want to get into the radio or TV business, look at the glass as half full. Realize that you're gonna, if you're gonna be in television, you're gonna do 2 or 3 things. If you're gonna be in radio, you're gonna do 2 or 3 things. But that's exciting and it's meaningful and there's plenty of opportunity. And I'm just picking the TV stations here in Oklahoma City at channels 4, 5, 9, and 25, or at radio stations all around the state to get a job. And I'll end and I'll pass this over to Roger with this. Because Roger was forced, and I shouldn't say the word forced, because Roger chose to go to video streaming of high school sports.
Oh, I was forced.
Okay. Because Roger decided that it would be in his best interest to go to video streaming of high school sports, he had to stretch himself. And he was scared to do it. But he knew that it would be worse not to do it than it would be to do it and have some hiccups. Now, it turns out he did it pretty well, and people like Cliff helped him along. But the point here is that there's enormous opportunity for people like Cliff. Because now that Cliff has done this for Roger in Ada, Cliff can do this in Oklahoma City, and he can do it in Topeka, Kansas, and he can do it in Shreveport, Louisiana, and he can do it anywhere in the world. And he got the opportunity from KADA in Ada, Oklahoma. So you have an unbelievable opportunity to enter into the business.
Here's the downside to technology. When I started here in 1978, we had one station. You had to be here. If you were on the air, you had to have someone here. We were here Thanksgiving. We were here Christmas. We were here New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. If we were on the air, there was somebody here. So we had one station, 12 employees. Today, as I sit here, we have 5 stations here in this facility. We have 12 employees, plus a couple of contract employees like Cliff. That's the downside. We are running more stations with fewer employees. So as a student graduating or looking to get into the media, it's harder for you than it was for me. When I started, they were begging. They had turnover all the time here. I needed beer money when I was a senior at East Central, and I heard about an opening. I came out here, I was hired. Literally, I was not qualified. That's just the way it was back then. They always had turnover. Well, now, especially now they're owned by the Chickasaw Nation, where we have outstanding fringe benefits, including health insurance and 401k. Not only do we have fewer employees, but we have employees that stay longer. The last job opening I had here was 9 years ago, and that was for a part-time board op position. So technology is our friend in many ways, but in many ways it hurts you because of technology. We're able to be on the air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but there's not necessarily people here. Computer technology has allowed us to be on the air, pre-tape things. I have disc jockeys that are on more than one station. And so I have fewer employees to do that. Now, are we as good as we were back then when we had employees live behind the microphone all the time? No, we're not. We're not as good of a radio station as we were. But technology has enabled us to run the stations with fewer people, therefore more economically. And so as a student, though, that's your challenge is there are fewer openings overall. Stations are running with fewer people. And you have to really up your game then to get the position that you want. You have to be someone, Cliff is going to get tired of us talking about him, but the guy has what it takes in terms of talent, but he has more than that. He has an attitude of positivity and can do to get the job done. The guy, no matter what I ask him to do, he's there, gets done, and I never have to worry about him. You have to really up your game these days to get in front of someone that's filling positions and then to maintain your position, because we all are making more demands of you. Once again, as Vance talked about, doing 2 or 3 different jobs. It might be on the air. It might be production. You might have to do some sales. You might have to help with some promotions and social media work. It's a multifaceted position now. Everybody that's at my stations, we all do multiple things. Once again, that's just the nature of the industry these days. So, Daniel, turn it over to you.
I don't know how I'm going to follow up these 2 incredible gentlemen and all their years of experience, but I can tell you what we're doing on the curriculum side of things. So I'm looking to help students become jacks of all trades. We are looking to help students to embrace media across the board and to get them independent in media. Back in the day, you had to go out and buy a camera and you couldn't play with radio on your own. Maybe you were able to, build a little radio transistor, but you couldn't do the work of radio on your own. But today you can. I teach an intro to mass media course in which students do news writing, they do podcasting, they do video work, and they can do it for free. There's no investment besides that cell phone. And helping the students to where they get to where they can be producing things on their own is critically important. When I entered my major, I had an internship at a radio station. I had been writing forever. I had been doing video projects on my own. Some of the students that I'm working with today haven't had that background in high school. They haven't had that independent background. And I'm trying to encourage students to see you have the opportunity now to embrace these media, to experiment, to play around with it so that as they go through the major, they can already have their own background of experience to bring when they get to the professional end of things. Now, what I'm hearing from our internship coordinator is that when students are entering the workforce in their internships, that the instruction has been good. I work with incredible colleagues here at Langston University. I love the people I work with. No one here is sitting around just being like, well, social media, what are we going to do? It's a thing. It'll come and pass. No, we have people who are clearly dedicated to to emerging media. We have people who clearly have experience in the field, who want to get those students that level of experience. So the instruction that students are coming out with is good. The challenges we're facing continues to be keeping up with the technology in terms of providing students with tools as new technologies emerge that are not free, that are not the types of things that students can have on their phones. That's the area where we continue to be chasing the industry, making sure that we are keeping up to date with the things that are there. And it's hard to know sometimes which opportunities are good and which ones aren't. Should we be training our students on every new social media that emerges? What should we be working with them on? But I know that I do my best, and I know that the people I work with do the best to listen to industry experts to make sure they're keeping track of what's needed, so that when our students go into the workforce, they're as prepared as they can get from a college education. And students are facing larger workloads than they would have as incoming young people. I was just talking with a gentleman. I'm the newspaper advisor for the Langston Gazette, so I see more of the newspaper side of things right now. Back in the 90s, there were something like 450,000 working journalists, and today there's about 180,000 journalists. So we've lost over half of the writing journalist population, meaning that one, certain stories are not getting covered that should be, and two, each journalist is having to cover more themselves. And yes, that means covering the photography, being able to do video, being able to do the writing, being able to do all of it. And for someone like me, that's fantastic. I enjoy all forms of media, and I'm seeing that for my students too. So being able to be a jack of all trades, I see the hunger in the students that I work with to be that. And that's encouraging to me. So I'll toss it back to you, Mike.
Wonderful. That goes well into our next question, which you touched on a little bit. What can we do to better prepare students for our changing media environment? What do we see as educators that they need more of as they leave? Or Vance and Roger, what do you see that you need more from students? What are you not seeing when you get an intern?
Roger, why don't you go first?
You know, I'm going to beat a dead horse because we've probably been emphasizing this ever since I've been in a management position. And I know it's one of the hardest things to cultivate among students, but that is there's always going to be demand for sales and marketing people. And that seems to be one area that seems to not get the attention in broadcasting coursework. And I know it's probably the hardest thing to train and to teach because so much of it is a practical day-to-day thing. It's hard to teach theory about sales. You almost have to sort of get out and do it. But that has always seemed to be where the demand is among broadcasters, and more so than many other positions. I know, though, as a student, it's hard to think about that as a desirable field because unfortunately we're saddled with this image of Herb Tarlick on WKRP sloshing around with a briefcase and plaid trousers, and sales and marketing gets a bad image associated with it. But when it comes down to it, and Vance, I know will back me up on this, that's where the most demand seems to be in our industry because we are revenue producing entities. And it takes people to bring in that revenue. Listenership we can cultivate through our air signal, through our programming, things that don't require that contact with people in terms of solicitation. But I know as a student, it's hard to think about, God, who wants to, get into sales and my compensation is determined as a result of my direct association with revenue. How much money I make is going to be guaranteed on how hard I work. And a lot of people can't handle it. There's like a 70% failure rate among sales and marketing people in broadcasting because it's not the easiest thing to pursue. But I think Vance, once again, will back me up on this. yeah, we hear about the big salaries that the Ogles make, but I guarantee you there's salespeople at Channel 9 and Channel 4 that make just as much money, and they're working Monday through Friday, and they have holidays off. So sales and marketing is something that not really is one of the top jobs in a facility, but unfortunately gets the least attention sometimes from colleges and universities. And Vance, I hope you'll back me up on that. Am I speaking the truth, or am I speaking the truth?
Well, you are speaking the truth. So this would go back 17 years ago when I was still running radio stations. We had salespeople that made more than $250,000 a year, and they were worth every nickel. And they made $250,000 a year because they sold advertising and they got results for their clients. And that meant that the client continued to prosper. And when the client prospers, they'll advertise on the radio station or the television station, and then the television station prospers. This is a one-to-one unilateral process whereby if we're in the business of helping our customers generate more revenue for them. When we generate more revenue for them, they generate more revenue for us. This is a very, 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 very simple formula. But I think if you go back to the question, what does a person need to think about, or what trait or quality would you want to sort of hone in on? And this is at 30,000 feet. I would tell you that, quite frankly, the thing that I look for the most and the first is curiosity. I'm interested in hiring people that are curious, that want to know more, that read a lot, that listen a lot, that watch a lot. Those are the people that are trainable. Those are the people that care. Those are the people that you want at your radio or your television station. If you're curious about why a stop sign was put in your little town, or if you're curious about why a city council ordinance was done a certain way, that's who I want working for me, because that person cares. That's a glass is half full kind of person, and I would encourage it. And when you go in with a smile and go in and say, I am curious. On a more, as we move down from 30,000 feet to the treetops, I can tell you that channels 4, 5, 9, and 25 in Oklahoma City, 2, 6, 8, and 23 in Tulsa. Those 4 stations in Oklahoma City and 4 television stations in Tulsa are ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox affiliates. They all today have a minimum of 1 and sometimes 2 or 3 producer jobs available that are good paying, not high paying, good paying jobs. That if you apply yourself right now, you can get a job at that TV station. Now, you might not be a producer on the morning news, but you could surely be a producer on the noon news, on the weekend news, and then move yourself up. So, what has not changed in thousands of years is get your foot in the door. And if you're interested in television, they have jobs, and they have jobs right now. They'll hire you. But you're going to have to take your classes, and you're going to have to listen to your instructors so that you get that kind of experience, so they want to hire you. I'm familiar with some of the school's curriculums, and they're all very, very good. But you as a student, if television is of interest to you and you like news and you need a job, channels 4, 5, 9, and 25, 2, 6, 8, and 23 are hiring today. So I would make that a high priority. And then to just sort of add on to Roger's note about marketing, and I'll end with this. My father, who I adored, and he was a radio salesman his entire life. adult career. He had a saying once that I've never forgotten, which is, it didn't happen if it didn't get sold. So think about that a little bit. You're in the selling business yourselves every single day. You're selling yourself as to why you should move up in the line for your food. You're selling yourself for trying to find an intimate partner. You're in the business. You're selling yourself to do an awful lot of things. So believe it or not, what Roger said is true. You're already in the sales business. You ought to consider it. And I can't tell you how many people now run radio or television stations that started out in sales. There aren't any news anchors that are running radio or TV stations. There aren't any chief engineers that are running radio or TV stations. And there are about 1 or 2% of the radio or TV stations that are being run by news directors. Because at the end of the day, if you didn't sell something, nothing happened. So I'm giving you 2 really specific opportunities. All the radio and TV stations in the state of Oklahoma are hiring salespeople, and all the television stations in the state of Oklahoma are hiring news producers. And there's your entree into our business. So I hope that helps.
This is a fascinating take. I remember working with sales people who were also radio producers when I worked at a radio station. And they were, going back to what we were talking about earlier, they were people who did everything. They were on the air producing things. They were cutting ads. They were going out and selling those ads. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense given the radio and the television industry. I was a little taken aback at first when I realized, I'm thinking with a newspaper lens, because newspaper journalists can't do that to the same extent at all. The newspaper people have to be separate. Otherwise, that affects our credibility. And the news guy that I worked with at the radio station, he didn't sell ads either. But I am thinking about ways to incorporate sales into the curriculum now, because that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to brag on my students this semester a little bit, because what I've seen out of them is tenacity. The curiosity is a starting place that I see in so many of them. I see students who are hungry to understand what's going on in the world that they live in, especially at a university, where a student comes into a university and doesn't immediately understand how a university works. And so there's lots of opportunities to explore that, just like they would be exploring a city that they were living in. And the different businesses and the way different people have influence and power in those situations. And I've seen students take that curiosity and turn it into just a bulldog level of latching on to a desire to find the truth about things they want to know about. And I'm really proud of them for that. And that's something that I hope is contagious amongst all my students, because that's what I hope that they do. I see students who are coming in right now, fresh students who are upset about the way the world works, who have a hunger for justice, have a hunger for fixing problems that they see. And what I'm telling them is, you want to work on that? First of all, yes. Second of all, let's do it right. Let's bring the integrity that we have to this. Let's go through this process the way it works. And I've been so proud of them. And some of them are sitting here in the room. And I hope that you all feel proud of yourselves this semester, because I've seen those of you who I've been working with, I've seen you take that hunger and turn it into skill. I've seen you take talent and turn that into something more refined. But just like Vance was saying, do not lose that curiosity. Keep going, keep uncovering, and however curious you are, get more curious. I hope to see that combination of curiosity and tenacity continue forward.
Wonderful. Real quick, before we move on to kind of our last question area, if any students or faculty have questions, please drop them into our text chat, and then we can visit them closer to the end. after this question bit. So with what we can better prepare students for to be successful on entering media, what new opportunities are presenting themselves for broadcasters or web producers or media in general? What things are you seeing that are new from either from where you started or that have emerged as a trend over this last couple of years? What is a new direction for students to look?
Well, I'm going to jump in here, and I don't want to belabor this point because we've been talking about Roger's radio station that's been on the air for a long time, and he's been there for 43 years. But this video streaming thing that his radio station is doing for high school sports is going to morph. Once he gets good at doing the video streaming, he'll be able to do any video streaming. If you can do a high school football game or a high school basketball game or a girls softball game or a girls volleyball game, and you can video stream it, you can do everything from city council meetings to 4th of July parades to funerals to bar mitzvahs to you name it. And so this is a growth area that is just absolutely chock full of opportunity for radio stations that, quite frankly, Roger, you didn't even think that this existed 5 years ago. Now, are we in the infancy of this growth? Yes. So are we a toddler? Probably. But I'm going to here to tell you, Roger might be retired, but we have a group of radio stations that have formed a coalition of video streamers, and there's 10 of them. Radio stations in Oklahoma that convene pretty regularly to talk about video streaming. And virtually all of them would agree to this statement, that by the year 2025, 50% of their advertising revenue will come from their video streaming. And see, that video streaming doesn't go on their channel, whether it's AM 1220 or FM 98.7. It's out there for anybody to pick up if they want it. They don't have to pick it up if they don't want it. So what's going to happen in the radio industry is that they're going to have dual paths of success. One will be the audio from their terrestrial radio signal that they've done for 100 years. And then the second will be this video streaming. The television stations are about to grow exponentially with, and many of you have heard of this, ATSC 3.0. And what they're going to be able to do is they're going to have all sorts of sub-channels that they can put out, different forms of programming. So right now, OETA, and by the way, I should have mentioned OETA on the news producers, because just as much as the ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox affiliates need news producers, so do the PBS television stations in the United States. So a shout out to OETA. I watch the World News. I watch Judy Woodruff every single night, and then on Friday nights, Rich Lenz at 7:00. But they're going to have multiple channels, multiple zone casting opportunities that will put them into the digital world at the same playing field as Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. And that's going to, it's unfolding right now. It's been tested in 5 or 6 markets. It works. So now it's going to unfold over the next 2 or 3 years. And much like radio is going to blossom with this video streaming, TV is going to blossom with these multi-channel opportunities. And so there might be a segment of the marketplace that wants to see a certain kind of business news show, but it wasn't popular enough to put on the main channel. Now it's going to be put out onto sub-channels, and it's going to be absolutely mind-blowing how much content you, the viewer, could have. And this will give you guys that are looking to enter into the business in the next year, 2, 3, 4 years, depending on how far along in college you are, it's going to give you great opportunities. So I think Roger's right. Technology is a tricky thing. It takes a little bit to adapt to it, but once you start learning about it and you get pretty good at it, there's no going back. That toothpaste is not going back in the tube.
I think that's exactly right. And a prime example, when I started in 1978, I was basically evaluated on one thing, and that was how good was my voice. And I didn't have a typical radio voice back then, but that's primarily how you got hired back then. Was how good of a voice do you have? Now, because we're all required to do so many other things, there's a lot more ways to evaluate a potential hire. It's not about just your voice on the radio anymore. One of my most valuable people here is the guy that handles my IT stuff, my computer. His official job is program director. And in the traditional sense, that means that, he decides what songs to play on what stations. But more importantly, he handles all that technology that's here working after 7 o'clock in the evening that keeps the stations on the air. And that's integrating computers, making sure the computers play what they're supposed to play. That's a huge job, because when we leave here at 7 o'clock, we need to make sure the stations sound at least half as good as they were during the day when we're open for business. It has to play the weathers at the right time. It has to manage the rotation of the playlist. It has to run long form programs on the weekends. It has to start OU football up at 2:30 in the afternoon. So computer skills have gotten to be a huge thing, obviously. And that's just one of the multiple things now that we look for in people. And, we're selling some Facebook ads right now. So how much do you know about social media? That's becoming an important part of our revenue stream. So there's so many more opportunities now. Once again, as I said earlier, sometimes there's not as many opportunities in some respects. But in other respects, as Vance just outlined, there's a lot more opportunities for a variety of different skills that we did not have when I started back in 1978. Computer stuff, social media stuff, videography, editing, that's now a part of radio, is all this TV stuff. So it's a lot more opportunities than there were.
I don't know what to add to that, but I do have a question to follow up with Vance on this ATSC 3.0. Do you anticipate that like there are 12 people working on Roger's 5 radio stations, that the same staff will be employed to create these new sub channels, or will there be new staff hired in order to staff these channels? Are we going to see an expansion of hires, or are we going to see the old staff?
Well, the short answer to that question is I'm not sure you're necessarily going to see the hires on a local level, but you're going to see hires from people around the country that are producing some syndicated programming that's going to be put into those slots. So there'll be more hires. Now, whether they are Oklahomans or Nebraskans or New Yorkers or Californians, I don't know that answer. But what I do know is there's going to be a whole slew of people working on content that had not been produced before. And there's going to be a race to get to it as quickly as possible. It will become hyper local down the road. Here, Daniel, here's a perfect example. I live in Oklahoma City. There are 4 sports talk radio stations. They're competitive. With ATS 3.0, I'm going to bet you dollars to donuts that at least 2, if not 3 of them are going to be on TV in the next 2 years. So you will listen to them on the radio, and then you will also watch them on TV. So there a TV station is going to then now employ or hire those anchors of the sports talk station, and they're going to pay them a little bit more to be on the TV. And the more successful they get on the TV, the more they're going to get paid. So it is the rich will get richer because the good ones will rise to the top. And sports talk will be a big part of this entire process. Weather will be a big part of this entire process. Business news will be a big part of this process. And then there's going to be newspapers that are struggling, and I'm not trying to be dismissive of the newspaper industry. I still read my newspaper every day, but fewer people do read the newspaper every day. So newspapers are going to start to supply the content. And you know what? Before you know it, on TV, on a channel, will be the Oklahoman or the Tulsa World or the Herald Palladium or whatever your market is, with the obituaries on TV, because these channels exist. So it is just going to allow a lot more content, and with more content will come more employment. But I can't tell you that as a student you're going to go to channel 4 or OETA and get a job, but there will be a lot more jobs available.
All right. Thank you, Vance. Back to you, Mike.
Roger, could you expand on what you put into chat?
I think, as we sort of alluded to earlier, COVID really ground everything to a halt. I think we also had a round of some layoffs, I think, that happened 2 years ago, too, as revenue took a precipitous fall for most TV and radio stations. And yeah, it's been a rough go, but I think we are seeing, hopefully, as to coin a phrase, or not to coin a phrase, but to illustrate a phrase, we're rounding the curve. And I think we really are this time. I think with the vaccination levels, and now these new drugs are coming out that are in pill form, I think we're really and are seeing a dramatic improvement in the COVID situation. And I am really seeing some increased activity again in terms of business. I'm starting to hear from customers we haven't talked to in a while. Now, our biggest challenge right now from advertisers is inventory. Roughly 30% of our revenue comes from the automotive sector, and car dealers don't have any inventory. The car lots are bare in many respects. We have dealerships here that are literally 70% empty because they can't get inventory. Well, they're not going to spend thousands of dollars with me to advertise an empty car lot. So that is still having an impact for us. But I see improvement. I'm hearing from customers I haven't heard from for a while in terms of reactivation. My own company is a huge advertiser. Chickasaw Nation spends millions of dollars in advertising, more on TV than I personally condone, but they spend a lot of money, and they're starting to ramp back up again. Off the record, I think we're going to see live shows starting to return from them. They've been a real holdout for live shows. I know Choctaw Nation is doing live shows, the Hard Rock up in Tulsa and the River Spirit up in Tulsa. They started back their live shows. Chickasaw Nation has really been conservative in this area. But I think we're seeing some signs that that's going to start back up again. When all of those activities start back up, that's going to mean, once again, revenue is going to start back up in terms of promoting those events. So I'm seeing these positive signs having to do with COVID being manageable. Now, we may have this forever. My wife's a registered nurse, 40 years in the business. She basically tells me we may always have COVID now to deal with, but it's going to, not be as rampant once we get things under control with either the vaccine and or the preventative medications that are just now starting to be talked about. But I really feel strongly that we're getting back to normal. And I think that's going to have an effect of reopening things. Hiring is going to come back. We're not going to see any more layoffs. And so I think the timing is good as things start ramping up again. And I really believe that.
Go ahead, Vance.
Oh, Mike, maybe I jumped too soon. I'm reading a chat question and I was going to answer it, but go ahead if you want.
Yeah. So we're seeing for graduates in the near future, it's a good time to get into industry because we're going to see growth as we come out of our last couple of years. That's what Roger's saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, Vance, if you want to address our other question.
Well, the question here says, I've seen some of our graduates quickly drop out of the industry because of the workload now expected. How can private sector address this? I'm not sure that I have an answer on the first part of that question. I think that we're going to expect more. I think the broadcasters are going to expect more from the employees. But I think Microsoft is expecting more from its employees, and so is Apple, and so is Gillette razor blades. I think that's here to stay. Technology, we have to remember technology. We think in our own little bubble, but the whole world is affected by technology. You know, go fly on an airline now and watch how technology basically runs almost every touch point of that experience for you. So I'm not sure that we're going to expect any less. But let me answer the second part of that question, which is how can the private sector address this? If the private sector is losing employees because of overwork, there's really only one solution, and that's to pay them better. And so that will happen when Rogers radio station or when a television station rebounds with the advertising. Rogers indicated that he's starting to see the rebound. If we could get back to the profitability, and we will, it's just a matter of when. If we could get back to the profitability of 2019, you're going to see people making more money. And that producer's job starting out at $37,000 a year and you're working your fanny off or your tail off is going to be a $50,000 a year job just because. So, you know, the marketplace has a way, it's like water. It will reach its own level pretty quickly on the actual compensation. And I think compensation will go a long ways towards solving the second part of the question. And I'm not really sure who asked this question, but they are right. I mean, we are asking a lot more from them. And because we're asking a lot more, it's a harder job. But with a harder job, you will make more money. And so I don't know if that solves what the concern was of this professor, but I think it probably states the obvious, which is there is a correlation between profitability and compensation.
I think that's perfectly said, and I'm a prime example of this. I'm the boss, but I'm here usually 6 days average per week. I'm doing 50 to 60 hours a week, and I'm the boss. I have this main guy, my program director there when we were implementing the streaming. He was averaging 55 hours every week. And yeah, it was a big workload. He had to go to games on Saturdays. You know, he was here Monday through Friday, but then he was at the football stadiums making sure all of the streaming stuff worked. Yeah, I expect a lot more out of him, but I'm also paying him a lot more than we used to when we had more jobs, more positions. As I mentioned earlier, we're operating with fewer employees than we would like, but for those that are here, we're paying them more. Not to mention, as I alluded to earlier, the benefit package that we have. And I think that's pretty much a standard thing. You are seeing compensation levels go up. So yeah, as Vance said, we expect more, but that's just because of the position we're in. We have to do it to get the job done. And that's happening to all of us, including the boss.
And he's a good boss.
All right. Take just a moment, see if we have any other questions pop in. While I watch that, I'd like to thank Vance Harrison, Roger Harris, and Daniel Thompson for stopping in to be on our panel today. And for students and faculty, keep an eye out. The OBEA student competition is going to have its due date on January 31st. 2022. And as usual, I imagine we will be a part of the Oklahoma Association of Broadcasters convention to celebrate our student productions.
March 24th and March 25th.
Thank you, Vance.
And yes, you all are invited, and there is no charge. And your faculty advisor or your university will collate the students that want to attend, get you there. It's at the River Spirit Casino in Tulsa, which if you want to go see a business on the rise, go see this place. It's unbelievable. And you're all invited. There's no charge. And we wish you the best, because if you do well, we'll do well.
Thank you. All right. We have one last question from Jonah. Looking for any leads or directions on sports-oriented internships and broadcasts. Roger pointed out that most media outlets do have internship possibilities. Is there a place where we can look for employment at broadcasting stations or internships at these stations?
Yeah, well, I'm going to give you a perfect example. And this, again, I don't want to harp too much on this video streaming. Last Friday night, we, the Oklahoma radio stations in Oklahoma, produced video streamed 96 football games. We want to do 196 and then 296 and 396. We need cameramen. We need play-by-play announcers. We need color commentators, and we need IT people. Now, it's going to be on a contract basis, but I'm here to tell you, you go to Bill Countryman in Ardmore, or Blake Brewer in Elk City, or Heston and Harold Wright in Weatherford, or Roger Harris in Ada, or the Potters in Bartlesville, or Will Payne and his mother in Eastern Oklahoma, or Senator Bill Coleman in Ponca City, or Casey Vineyard in Norman, Oklahoma. And they are looking for announcers. They're looking for play-by-play people, color people, videographers, and IT people, all for this video streaming, which is blossoming at an unbelievable rate. So you don't have to live in Oklahoma City to do this. You can live anywhere in the state, and somebody's doing it, and you should call that radio station today.
And Vance, I think you'll agree, it's the smaller markets are where these opportunities are. The big boys don't really do this as much, right?
Yeah, well, you'll notice that when I started naming all those towns, you didn't hear Tulsa or Oklahoma City. That's correct. So, you go cut your teeth with Roger Harris in Ada, Oklahoma. You're any good at it. And please take no offense to this, Roger, but there's a lot of upside opportunity once you've made your mark in the business. And I always tell people your first job is not your last job. It's just your hardest job to get. That's all.
And having worked for Blake Brewer over in Elk City, I can confirm it's a lot of fun. It's a good time, and those are good people. So
yeah. And here's the thing. Blake's going to do 12 football games tonight. 12. He didn't do none 10 years ago. He's doing 12 tonight. Roger Harris is going to do 1 tonight. But next year, I'll bet you he does 3 or 4. He'll say, oh, no, I'm not going to. Bank it.
And we have one on Saturday, too.
There you go. He's gonna be doing multiple games. It's a growing business, and sports is the easiest entree into broadcasting. Trust me.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Vance, Daniel, and Roger. Thank you, everyone, for attending our OBEA OETA Student Day panel, and we'll see you all in the spring.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
thank you all.
Thank you.